morning, everybody. Welcome. I don't know if any of you were out on the Capitol steps to hear the opening. It was very moving. It was a tribute to Greg Iles, who passed away recently. But I want to thank Galloway for having us here. Any day I get to come to Galloway is a good day. And I want to introduce our lovely authors. So we have today with us Abbott, Kahler, and Susan Cahalan. Abbott, the author of Undone, formerly writing as Karen Abbott, has written several other books, New York Times bestsellers, including Sin in the Second City, American Rose, and The Ghosts of Eden Park. The Counterculture in Undone is the Galápagos Islands in the late 20s and 30s, post-World War I and pre-World War II, where various characters that you'll hear about were searching for a utopia and ended up finding themselves embroiled, well, in a lot of things, but eventually as victims in some cases and witnesses to murder. Hampton Sides called Eden a dash of Conrad with a bit of Hitchcock, and it's recently been made into a major motion picture. Susannah is the award-winning author of the best-selling memoir, Brain on Fire, about her hospitalization with a rare autoimmune disease, which was also made into a movie, and she's reported on this in the New York Post. Her second book was The Great Pretender, and now today we have her here for The Acid Queen. So the Counterculture in The Acid Queen is the circle of Timothy Leary, which at the center, of course, stood Rosemary Leary, who was drawn first willingly and then unwillingly as his life went along because events kind of spun out of control for them. Susan Orlean describes it as the story of a woman who embodied an era of freedom, experimentation, and psychedelic adventure. So even better than fiction, both of these works will draw you into events that you've probably read very little about, and these writers just keep getting better and better with their strong narrative style, attention to detail, and ability to tell indelible, incredible stories. So that is my introduction, but we want to hear you guys talk about your books because they're so rich with so many characters and so many events. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and if we kind of hit a lull, I'll ask a question.
Okay. First, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for coming out at 9:30 on a morning on Saturday to listen to people talk about books. I feel like that's a vanishingly rare occurrence these days, so thank you for doing that and supporting the book festival here, which is one of my favorite book festivals ever, and thank you, Valerie, for moderating this conversation. So as Valerie said, my book is Undone. The subtitle is A True Story of Sex, Murder, and Utopia at the Dawn of World War II. And it tells the true story, the stranger than fiction true story of a group of people who leave Germany right after the stock market crash at the turn of the 1930s to try to find utopia on a remote Galápagos island called Floriana. And things go terribly awry. People's motivations start competing. Everybody has a different idea of what utopia is. There is a character who yanked out all of his teeth and had them replaced with a set of steel dentures. There is a character nicknamed Crazy Panties. There's a lot of sort of mayhem going on, and I was fascinated by this story because to me it was timeless and universal. Like everybody at some point in their lives has thought about fleeing civilization, fleeing the lives, fleeing the madding crowd, and starting over somewhere else where all of your problems are going to be left behind. But of course, that's not the way that works. And you know, I'd love to talk to you more about that as we get into it. But to me, it's sort of Charles Darwin meets Agatha Christie. You know, everybody goes to this island, and not everybody gets out alive. So.
Oh, well, I got to read this book, Undone, in very early form and then later again, and it is so outrageous, extremely lush, it's beautifully written, and it's all done with archival work through the archives, and she's brought them to such a life.
Well, likewise with The Acid Queen.
Thank you. But anyway, I'm going to say my piece about Undone. It's an incredible book, and it's really fun to be here with Abbott, who is not only someone I admire as a writer, but who is a good friend. And thank you, Valerie, for having us both, as you said. And I have to say, Mississippi, I've only been here one time before. This is my second time in Mississippi. And I feel so welcomed. I feel it's just such a warm and wonderful place. This book festival is incredible. And John Evans at Lemuria has been, this is the first time meeting him, but he's been an incredible advocate of my work throughout the years. And so it feels really good to be here in a room full of wonderful people, and so thank you. So The Acid Queen is a biography of a woman most people don't know. And so that was an interesting undertaking to write a book about someone who has been essentially erased and forgotten. Her name was Rosemary Woodruff Leary. And for a period of time in the 1960s, she was a one-named media heroine. She was someone who, if you said Rosemary, you wouldn't even have to use her last name. You would know who she was talking about, and her nickname was the Acid Queen, hence the title of the book. But Rosemary was so much more than just the right-hand woman to a man named Timothy Leary, who was the kind of high priest of acid in the 1960s, Harvard professor, very controversial media figure. She was more than that. I mean, she helped shape his narrative, she helped write his speeches, she helped even create his clothing. But she herself came from St. Louis, from poverty, and managed to have an extremely full and interesting life before even meeting Timothy Leary. She was an airline stewardess. She was involved in the Beat Generation. She was married to a jazz accordionist. And she had this wild, outrageous, cinematic life. But really, what I think the book is about, it's about an era of the counterculture that has been largely dominated by male narratives. And I've switched the kind of lens to take in someone who's typically on the edge of the frame. And so with that, taking in new information about a time in our history that we think we kind of have become a caricature, we think we know all about, but in kind of focusing on a person who's not typically focused on, you get new information about that time. So Rosemary is a reflection and reaction to those times.
So how did you decide to write these books? Like, what drew you to these stories?
Well, I always am drawn to subversive periods of history, subversive characters, especially subversive women who are flouting the rules and conventions of mores of their time. And I'm always looking for a narrative that can be written like fiction. You know, I want my nonfiction to be able to read, like, you have to check to make sure it's actually nonfiction. But so I was researching another murder that happened around World War II, and I happened to come across a tabloid headline that basically said, if I can recall correctly, was Dr. Ritter with his steel teeth poisoned in paradise? Has Baroness Eloise, otherwise known as Crazy Panties, poisoned one of her love slave and sent the other to his death? And why is Frau Ritter returning to Hell's volcano? And so I forgot all about the murder I was looking into, and it was like a record scratch where I was like, and after confirming that Crazy Panties did indeed live up to the nickname, I was like, this is the book I have to write. But publishers said, you write American history. We don't want you writing about these Europeans. And I made the argument that there are plenty of American characters here, and there are fleets of American explorers and wealthy sportsmen who come over to the Galápagos under the pretense of oceanic exploration, but they really just were checking out these crazy characters. But they said, I kept getting rejected and rejected. My publishers wanted me to keep writing American history, but I finally got them to say yes. So I've basically been working on this book for about 12 years. I just never could let it go.
Amazing.
So
it's amazing how that happens. In fact, where I start, this book really starts with my first book, which was Brain on Fire, which was a book that was rejected by all publishers except for one. And that I was told that it was kind of a too rare and kind of a singular experience. People wouldn't be able to relate to it.
Yeah. By the way, it was a #1 New York Times best-selling book. Yes.
And it did find an audience in this incredible, just really unexpected, no one expected way. And that's kind of how publishing is. You know, it's an art, not a science. And this is a testament to just the resilience that you showed in terms of knowing that that was your project. And that takes a lot of strength, because it's hard sometimes when you're told no that many times. But the way that I got, interested in Rosemary, it starts with Brain on Fire because I'm interested in altered states through my own experience with prolonged psychosis from my autoimmune disease of my brain that I wrote about, which was about a month of my life where I was psychotic and hallucinating and was an unreliable narrator. And from that, in that book, I actually wrote about ketamine, because ketamine affects the same receptor of the brain that was affected by my condition. And so I had a part about dissociation and rubber hand delusions, which I can talk about if you're interested in. And so that was there. And then in my second book, The Great Pretender, which is about the history of a history of psychiatry through the lens of this very controversial study, I wrote about how this one psychiatrist named Humphrey Osmond, who coined the term psychedelic with Aldous Huxley, actually used to give LSD when it was legal and it was a tool used by psychiatrists. He would give LSD to his architect when he was designing asylums as a way to, it was seen as a psychotomimetic, as in a mimicking of psychosis. And the architect actually would take the LSD and see, oh, those recesses under the bed, that's scary when you're in a psychotic state, or this, this closet is too dark, or this hallway is too narrow. He was able to see things in a different way that kind of would match, or he thought might match the way the patients there did. So I wrote about both of those in my 2 prior books and had various people reach out to me, because psychedelics have really, there's been a shift in the culture, a massive shift in our understanding of psychedelics, and kind of asking for my take about that and my kind of psychotic experience versus the psychedelic experience. And so that was in the back of my head, and there's an amazing, which I think you're involved, you do the New York Public Library scholar. Yeah. So there's this kind of scholar in residence at the New York Public Library where you get a desk at the main branch of the library, and it's so exciting. And in the library are the Timothy Leary papers. They're housed there. 400 bankers' boxes worth of material at the New York Public Library.
Which is like the mother
Which is
lode.
just
Yeah.
wild. He was a self-mythologizer, among many other things. But so I started going through the Timothy Leary files, because anytime you talk about psychedelics, Timothy Leary is the first name that you encounter. But then I became aware that there was a much smaller collection that is not accessed pretty much ever, called the Rosemary Woodruff Leary collection. And those were 20 bankers' boxes. But in those were diaries, an unpublished book, her tax returns. I mean, it was like every single piece of her life in these boxes. And I immediately found someone who I thought was interesting, and that kind of, I went from there to focus on her.
How long did it take you to write the book?
It took me 4 years
Okay.
to write it. Yeah, I like, as Abbott is, we're both completists. I would say,
Yeah.
how long did, I mean, you said.
Yeah, it was
in
sort
terms
of
when you
piecemeal. But
started.
when I really started, probably 2 years.
Yeah, that's fast.
Yeah,
I
it was
think.
fast because I
Yeah.
think I had the narrative had already been so ingrained in my psyche.
You had been
so-
in it, you'd been like immersed in it for so long.
Yeah, I was definitely, went to Floriana, which was probably the best.
Oh, you have
part
to
of the
tell them.
research.
So she went to the Galapagos. You
Yeah.
tell them about
Well,
your
and
trip.
actually, that's my next question,
Yeah.
because the setting
The
is so
research.
vivid. So
Yeah.
please tell us about, like where they lived on the island a little bit, and
Yeah.
just what you saw, what you found when you went there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was very interested in addition to just sort of fleeing civilization, what was going on with these people. And of course, this was the time when the Weimar Republic was falling, Hitler was coming into power, the stock market had just crashed. So whatever was going on in their personal lives, which were all a mess, it was also, there was like a great impetus for them to want to flee where they were at the time. And the first people who come over is Dr. Ritter, who's this sort of self-styled philosopher who was obsessed with Nietzsche and who fancied himself that he was going to be the next great thinker.
And he left his wife.
He left his wife, Dory, his partner, who was also his patient, suffering from multiple sclerosis, left her husband. And they didn't want to pick the sort of tropical ideal. They wanted a dark Nietzschean challenge. And that's exactly, you might think of the Galapagos if you've never been there, and think that it's, waving palm trees and glittering gold sand and this lush tropical vegetation. But it's actually very barren, very craggy. Some of the islands don't have any freshwater source at all. They're not habitable by humans. A lot of them not habitable by any animals either. And they picked, this is the place they picked. It was a great idea. And so they picked Floriana, which not only was not very habitable, it had one freshwater source, so they weren't completely screwed, but it was a place where people had settled over the years and fled. Like, just everybody failed. But they would try, and they were like, oh my God, get me the hell out of here. And there was all this murderous lore. Pirates used to stop there. There were dictators. There were people murdered before. And so they show up here, and they're like, wow, this is Utopia. So
For them, it was,
For
because
them
they
it
were
was.
such
Yeah,
odd people. I could,
Yeah. But today, to just bring that to today, Floriana is obviously habitable now by human beings. There are maybe 400 people who live there. I think I met every single one of them. There are 2 bars. I definitely went to both of the bars. Really, really warm, welcoming people, but it's still very primitive. You know, Wi-Fi, I couldn't get Wi-Fi for like 3 days in a row. My husband thought I was dead. You know, it's not a place where you can walk up to a restaurant and say, I'd really, you know, like to have lunch. You have to call ahead of time, like 2 days. They have to get provisions from the mainland. And it just gave me a newfound respect for these people back in the 30s who decided to make this journey. Like, sure, it was nuts, sure, it's crazy, but it was also incredibly brave. Yeah. They came there with absolutely no modern conveniences. This woman has multiple sclerosis. She can't even walk properly without great pain. And they, you know, cleared the land, physically built their house, built a garden, he built a shower that imported water from the stream and made like an actual like shower head. So it was actually incredible what they were able to do, of course, before it all fell apart and people started dying.
Right.
So then tell us about the other people that came along.
Oh, well, let me...
No.
Okay, so the second people come, you know, the first people I think are very, you know, these intellectual types who are, you know, into their own solitude and their own utopia. The next who come is a family. It's a World War I veteran and his girlfriend. She's pregnant, 5 months pregnant by the time she arrives in Floriana, and bringing along with them also his 15-year-old son from his first marriage. So the first thing they do is go to meet Dr. Ritter and Dory, who are already there, and Dory is excited having another female companion here. Maybe they'll be friends, but she takes one look at Margaret, who is the pregnant woman, and says, what kind of crazy person would have, what idiot would have a baby on this remote island? Margaret looks at Dory and says, what kind of moron quotes Nietzsche on a remote island? Like, so they didn't really get along. And then, of course, the third people is the Baroness, AKA Crazy Panties, with 2 of her male lovers. She shows up and announces that she's going to turn Floriana into the next Miami. She's going to build a hotel just for American tourists. And she said that God told her in a dream that she was to come to Floriana and conquer it just for herself. So this does not go over well, needless to say, with the other people, and therefore the frictions begin.
I mean, it's a cliche, but it's really stranger than fiction.
Yeah, it's
you couldn't make it up, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think Doro was my favorite character.
Me too.
At the end.
That's mine as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
Mine was the Baroness. I don't
She
know what
just
that says
hung
about
in.
me.
So speaking of people hanging in, tell us about
Yeah.
Rosemary's relationship with Timothy.
Sure. You know, I think what binds our books, which are
Yeah.
very different on the surface, but I think there's underlying, obviously, utopia, dystopia,
Yeah.
but also bravery and hubris. And Rosemary was a part of this kind of revolution in consciousness that was being spearheaded by Timothy Leary. They started a commune together, a kind of experimental acid commune on this grand estate in a very fancy hamlet in upstate New York. And there, at first, she was, you know, she felt like she was in some ways Timothy Leary's Pygmalion. He was kind of shaping her and shaping her consciousness and teaching her about not only how to engage with LSD, but how to expand her mind. She was reading a lot of philosophy. She was reading a lot of the kind of mystics and Eastern religion. And this is someone who was a high school dropout, but she was extremely well read and very much a searcher. And she saw a lot of opportunity in Timothy Leary, and she loved him dearly. And in about 6 months, it was great. And then the law they got arrested at the Mexico border, bringing marijuana into Mexico, which wasn't maybe the wisest move. That was one of 3 drug arrests, and they had periodic raids at the Millbrook estate, this fancy estate. The town didn't like, the various vagabonds coming up to get high at this estate, and a woman wearing a fur coat shopping down Main Street with nothing underneath. So all these things they didn't like, and so as the law started to kind of focus its attentions on the Learys, Rosemary and Timothy really started to, I would say it was an extremely abusive relationship, not physically, but he was, in many ways, this book, if you look at Timothy Leary through her eyes, it's a study in narcissism and probably malignant narcissism. He was someone who loved to be loved by crowds. but struggled very deeply with being loved individually. And so they had a very kind of codependent relationship again. She was helping write his speeches. She was helping shape his image. She was feeding him. She was housing him. She was taking care of his children. And in return, he often was very cruel and dismissive. There was a real kind of ping-ponging back and forth between them until, it did get to too much at some point, and they do break up at one point, and he actually turns on her with the FBI, but that's for another story. But she was someone who hung by him during some of the worst behavior, but helped break him out of prison. Hooked up with the Weather Underground and the Black Panthers to help, ferry him out of prison and into a safe haven. So she was someone who was fully committed. She said, I was mated to him, but he did not return that same kind of feeling, I think.
Yeah, I don't think he would have been who he was without her, without a doubt.
I don't think so. I think in a lot of ways, it's a diffuse influence that she had on him, but he very much lacked authenticity.
Yeah.
And she had she was overflowing with authenticity. And at one point when he realized the power that she had, she was very beautiful as well. She was in every single one of the shots taken of him.
Yeah.
So he started to realize her power after they got married, but it still didn't stop the kind of narcissistic abuse that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, she did all the work,
Yeah.
I mean, she basically, that's probably one reason why he's still famous, because, the writing and all of that.
She also she kept his archives. So all those archives at the New York Public Library,
Yes.
they're there because of her. She was the one who shepherded them when he was in prison and found safe havens for them and even kept the files in order. She cleaned the house, she fed him, she undergirded the kind of basic things he needed to even be the public-facing person he was. I think he would have fallen apart without her.
Yeah.
But I think, the way you write it through her eyes, they separate many times, they come back together, he has affairs, and she did stand by him. And I particularly just kind of liked the way that, we won't give it away, but her life developed and kind of, ended as she got older. But she was very well respected, too, by the people in their circle. So just to shift gears a little bit, could you describe your research process? We'll start with you.
Sure.
And also, how is AI going to be incorporated into that? Is it being incorporated?
I am not a fan of AI at all. Like, I've never used ChatGPT, like GPT. I sign on.
At my company, we're supposed to be learning, but at my company,
know.
Penguin Random House, we say it starts with the book, it ends with the book. So.
Yeah. I mean, maybe to my detriment, but I'm sort of a Luddite in that sense and very old school. And to me, when you can go online and look at a collection that's been curated and posted, and to me, that's what somebody else curated. That's not necessarily the information I want to find or the information that I'm going to find interesting that I think is going to really bring the characters to life. To me, the greatest thrill about doing what we do is going into a dusty old archive where you're the only person and you maybe haven't eaten in 12 hours and you are just sitting there with the boxes, and it's a detective hunt. Each new folder, each new envelope, there might be a connection made between one piece of paper and the next that you didn't see before. And this is not the kind of thing that AI is going to help with. It's not the kind of thing that even curated collections, big scanned online is going to help with. You really still have to do the old school and do the footwork and the detective work. And to me, that's the greatest joy of doing this kind of thing. So for this book, I was very, very lucky that this man by the name of Lorenzo Di Stefano donated his entire archive to the University of Southern California, where one of the American explorers lived. George Allen Hancock, if anybody knows Hancock Park in Los Angeles, it's named after him. And it was just hundreds and hundreds of photographs, papers, interviews, diaries, things that I had to translate from German, from Norwegian, all of these languages.
Wait, you had to translate it?
Oh, I hired people.
Oh, okay.
I wish I were I wish I were that great of a polyglot. But he donated all these. He was hoping to write a screenplay in the 1970s, and he was the last person to interview some of these explorers and all these people who had met these characters. And he donated it, and then COVID hit, and then it shut down. So when the archives opened back up, I think I was the first and only person to have gone through these archives, and it was really, truly incredible. And like I said, it's if I could just research a book and just never even do anything else,
I'm with you.
I'm
So
sure
that's the joy of it.
that's the
Yeah.
joy of it. Unfortunately, you don't get paid to just sit in a room and look at boxes, but that's the way it is.
Yeah, no, it is. It's hard to rest yourself out of the research stage.
Yeah.
I noticed a friend of mine, when I was writing my first book, gave me an amazing piece of advice, which was start right as soon as you can, before you're ready. Because you can research forever,
Yeah.
and you can get lost in it, and it's a lot of dopamine hit actually
Yeah, it is.
in an
It
archive. And to your point about AI, the archive as of right now is AI proof, so that's exciting to be a part of something that literally needs a physical body there. You can scan things, but as you said, it's someone's deciding what is important, which is I want to be the one who decides that. But B, Robert Caro has a line where he's the famous biographer that he says, "Turn every page."
Yeah.
And there's something to that. There's something about actually being in the same room, seeing the coffee stains, turning the page, seeing notes in the back that might not be interesting to someone who's scanning. Once you turn every page, there's a story in the archives, and you only can get that by being there physically. So that's really exciting. And I honestly have to say it's shifted so much in the culture with the AI. Which when we were working on this book, I don't even think the AI models that I would have access to can do the things they can do now. So they wouldn't even be
relevant.
But it's gonna be interesting moving forward. But in terms of the research, a lot of it was archival. I had the 20 some odd bankers boxes. I had the 400 bankers boxes for Leary, and I had 2 different narratives that I had to reconcile all of his books. She had an unpublished book, but I also had, luckily, I had quite a few people in her life who were still alive. So I got to interview, and her brother was a real amazing gatekeeper, the best kind of gatekeeper you can find. So once I finally convinced him that I was legit and I was serious, he said basically, he gave me other archives that weren't at the New York Public Library, and he said, you have full, unfettered, you can do anything you want, it just has to be true. Yeah. That's the only conditions he gave me, and he stuck by that, and he's incredible, and I was very, very lucky. And I got to immerse myself in her world, and I also did some things I haven't done before, in my 2 prior books, which was really do the things that she did. So tried a little bit of embodiment. So I used her tarot cards. I had her mirror. She was a big fan of the I Ching. I threw her I Ching. I did her yoga. I did her breath work. And that was a new experience for me, and it was wonderful. It was great. It changed my life, I will say. And another thing about this whole, it's not really AI specific, but I do think about archives in general and the work that we do is, think about archives now that are being created now. Where is all this going? You think technology changes so fast. Yeah. You have a piece of, something that holds data that is obsolete and you can't actually get the data off. These links go dead. What is going to happen to the archival record? And I think that's a real crisis. Yeah. And it scares me to not actually have something analog. I think it's important. So
also just thinking about letters. I mean, how invaluable letters are in our research. And
letters are the cornerstone of
exactly. Yeah. And so who's going to be collecting emails and printing out emails and putting them in, or
who's going to be comfortable donating their emails?
Exactly.
It's a real crisis, I think.
Yeah. I agree. And to your point, one more story, which I'm sure you have these. Well, you have Rosemary's necklace too.
I have Rosemary's necklace, which I typically do wear. Her brother gave me her League for. So they started a religion. She and Leary incorporated a religion called the League for Spiritual Discovery, LSD.
Yeah.
A little bit on the nose.
Oh yeah. Jinx.
Anyway, so they had necklaces that they had made pendants, and on the back it has LSD. And I don't wear it to pick up for my children typically. I feel like that's maybe a bridge. I do wear it a lot.
But no, it's an amazing thing. But so one more story about the archives that I think illustrates the points we were both talking about. I was in Washington D.C. One of the American explorers was by the name of Waldo Schmidt, who was pretty famous. Like sort of a crab expert of his day, was obsessed with this, always went down there to interview these characters, and he had kept several diaries. I had to translate his erratic handwriting, but in one of the diary pages, there was a flamingo feather. And you're just like, it's kind of when you find something like that, like this flamingo feather is like 100 years old, picked up by this guy who was on this island writing about these characters. And it's just those kind of visceral, physical connections that really make you think, these people are real. History is real, and these people can sort of come back to life. And I think both of us, the highest aim we have is to sort of transport people to the world that we're
in some
talking
ways, like
about.
bring them back to life.
Yeah. So it's like details like that too, that AI is never going to bring that kind of magic.
So how do you know when you're done, when you feel like you've done enough? And
Never.
Yeah.
The deadline.
Yeah, the deadline.
Yeah, the deadline
They
fast
wrest the
approaches and
gold
you
from
miss
your-
it.
The book from your cold
Yeah,
hands.
it really does feel. I did an event in Cape Cod. Rosemary lived for 25 years underground as Sarah Woodruff after she helped her husband escape prison and she was on the run. And I did an event there, and I said, "Did anyone know Sarah Woodruff?" That was her name. And an older man raised his hand, and he proceeded to tell us a story about this wild love affair that he had with her, that he had never told anyone because he knew that she was underground. And it was just this, at that point I was like, I need this in the book. I need to get this in the book. And I felt, so it never ends. It never ends of this feeling.
Something about that.
I know. I'm gonna try to get it in some situation, but yeah, it does feel like never ending.
Yeah.
So I kind of have a really nerdy question. It's been a long time since I've written a term paper, but how do you write your how do the footnotes get in the back of the book?
Oh God, I learned the very hard way with my first book that you want to do the footnotes, the end notes. I do end notes as you go along.
Oh wow, I don't. You're amazing.
Oh my God.
I admire you.
No, do you know it took me 6 months of doing nothing but end notes.
Oh, I was there.
Yeah, and also if you can't find the fact, if you can't find the source, I take it out of the book.
Oh.
Yeah.
I just take it out because if I can't source it, it doesn't belong in a nonfiction book. We're not allowed to make up dialogue. We're not allowed to make up any events. All of the dialogue is coming from the historical record. And so when I go along and you just want to make sure that everything's sourced. So I just started using Scrivener, which is one thing. Yeah, which is invaluable, I think, in nonfiction, and also just comments in the end where it's like, here's where I found this, here's where I found this. And I used to color code everything with physically, but I live in 600 square feet in New York City, and I was basically closing myself into an avalanche of detritus and was about to die of avalanche of detritus. But so I have to do it as I go along.
Yeah, I've made so many mistakes, and I've developed different tools. I don't do it as I go. What I do is I take notes. Well, what I did for my second book, which required even more research than this one, which was about psychiatry, this is so sacrilegious, but I cut open the books and scanned them so that I could go back and be like, where was that? And
I don't think that's sacrilege.
Well, you kind of
I think you have to do what you gotta
facing a
do.
book.
Yeah.
But I did do that, and that took and behind why that book took 6 years to write, because it took a long time to do that.
Yeah.
But this time I took notes off the book so that were searchable, so I knew, so each book had a file of notes. It's still, I maybe should just do, I guess I was doing that. I guess I was doing the footnotes, but not in a, I don't know. But I'm getting more and more color coding and organized because I've lost so many things, and it's so frustrating.
And it's so
and it's a waste of time, really.
Yeah, and you're I know this exists. I
Yes.
read it somewhere.
it's the worst.
It's mad making.
Yes.
So just kind of some more general questions. I know, Susannah, that you were a reporter, and so that kind of explains kind of how you ended up. But how did you decide to get started, writing these books? I know, I think in the first book that your editor said you should write this down or something like that. But anyway, tell us about how you got your start.
Yeah, I started when I was still a teenager at the New York Post. And
yeah, you said that last night, and I was like, wait, so
yeah,
tell us about that.
Yeah, so I started at 17 at this tabloid in New York City, which is best known for its headlines. And the most famous headline that they've ever made was "Headless Body in Topless Bar."
I know.
So it was a wild time to work
I saw that in Prague.
Yeah,
Remember there was
it was a famous
thing.
headline. I've had fantastic headlines, but I worked there covering, I went undercover as a stripper to get butt implants and had to drop trowel in company of people. I did a lot for my profession. I investigated mysterious smells in South Street Seaport and dog waste violations on the Upper West Side. Machete murders. I did a lot of strange things. But so that's where I kind of cut my teeth. And then I got very sick, and I had this rare illness, and I had this opportunity where one of my editors came to what was called a grand rounds, is a presentation that doctors do about cases that they're solving at that point. And he did a grand rounds about my case, and my editor had come with me to it, and she suggested that I talk to the higher up editor and write a piece about it. And so I ended up writing a piece about my experience. I think, what headline did they give it? My Mysterious Month of Madness.
Yeah.
And it's pretty good. So I wrote that piece, and I got so much reaction from that piece. It was before really viral, but it went viral, and I knew that I needed to write a book. Not only did I want to write a book, but I know I had like a moral imperative to write the book, to spread the word about this condition, because it was only discovered.
Your book has saved lives.
It has, yeah. And because the illness itself was only just like named in 2007, I was treated in 2009, and people were misdiagnosed with schizophrenia. So it became my moral imperative to start. And so that's kind of how I started this. And then kind of everything is birthed from there. I think everything's kind of in conversation with that book a little bit.
Yeah. How about you? I have unfortunately not saved any lives at all.
I don't know. You saved my life.
But I also started out as a journalist. I was in Philadelphia. I actually was thinking about going to law school, that I happened to get an internship at Philadelphia Magazine when I was in college. And it was kind of like, who are these crazy people and what is this crazy job? You know this at the Post. If you ever work in like a sort of close quarters where creative people abound and there's deadlines and there's like weird editors and fact checkers, it's just it was such a heady environment. And more than that, but it was kind of like, wow, you get to immerse yourself into somebody else's life or somebody else's story so deeply that you completely forget yourself.
Yeah. So
and to me, that was just a gift. I was just like, I am able to completely let this subsume me, and it was so liberating in a way to become somebody else for a while.
That's really interesting.
And so I really love that. And I was working as a journalist, and I was like, and I came upon this story, which I have a piece in Vanity Fair coming out this week about this story.
Yes,
so this is 1999. I'm a journalist in Philadelphia. And there's a lawsuit going on, and I'll give you the background on the lawsuit. In 1983, this fringe publisher, this very bizarre publisher called Paladin Press, published a book called Hitman, a technical manual for independent contractors. 10 years later, a retired Motown executive actually hires a low-level criminal to murder his disabled boy, the boy's mom, and the boy's nurse. So the victim's family sue Paladin Press, claiming they aided and abetted this murder. And the New York Times and the ACLU jump in and say, and a bunch of media organizations came to Paladin's defense, saying you can't hold the publisher liable for what this murderer did. You can't, they just published a book. So lost in all of this was who wrote Hitman. The byline was Rex Feral, which is like Ursat's Latin for King of the Wild Beasts. And I wanted to find out who Rex Feral was. So I called one of the lawyers who was representing the victims' families, and I said, can you give me any leads here? He said, well, I have hundreds of pages documented to this case. The name has been redacted on all but one of them. If you can find it, you can find the author. So I came down there. I spent a week. I went through literally every paper. I think on my last day, I found it. And Rex Feral turned out to be a divorced mother of two living in a trailer park in Florida.
Amazing. Amazing.
So I found Rex Feral. I wrote to Rex Feral. I became friends with Rex Feral. I wrote a novel about Rex Feral. She didn't want to come forward with her story. She had young grandchildren. She still had a career. She was still sort of very involved in her community. I wrote a novel. I sent it to publishers, and they all basically said, "You can't write this as fiction. This is crazy. You cannot. This is too crazy. It doesn't work as fiction." So I put it aside. 26 years pass. 26 years. She and I stay in touch sporadically, and then we fall out of touch a bit. And I wrote to her this past fall, and I'm like, you know what? I've just been thinking about you, thinking about our story, all the good times we had. I'd love to just connect with you again. She didn't respond. 2 months later, I got a Facebook message from her daughter saying, my mom has been looking for you. And she never got my email. So it was like this weird thing. She finally wants to tell her story. She's now 77. She's a great-grandmother. She lives in Florida and has like a boyfriend of 10 years who has no idea about her past. And her past involves like she was with a rogue cop who actually became a hitman. So it's like a crazy story, and it's coming out in Vanity Fair this week. So after 26 years, yeah, anyway.
Can't wait to read it. So we're almost out of time, and we want to leave time for questions. I'm sorry, go
Oh,
ahead.
no, I was just saying, I love the reaction because it's like, you've been talking about this for a while. I'm
I
excited
have.
for it to come
yeah.
out. It's gonna be exciting.
Does it have the name? What's the name of the book?
Oh, it's just an article.
Oh, it's not on.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
But
in
the
Vanity-
headline is the Florida Divorcee's Guide to Murder. I
that's
mean, of
good.
course,
That's good.
I didn't come up with it, but I can't. But I think it's she's like a divorcee. She's like 77.
So we want to leave time for questions, so I have one last question. Can you tell us, like, other books that maybe influenced your career, or, writers that you look up to? It doesn't have to be nonfiction, but I would just love to hear, like, well, if it is nonfiction, I'd love to hear what influenced you and inspired you.
Yeah, I will talk specifically, because I have so many, but specifically for The Acid Queen. I would say Minor Characters by Joyce Johnson, which is, Joyce Johnson was in relationship with Jack Kerouac, and she was a writer as well, and she wrote about the beat movement from women's perspective, which was so unusual. That was a huge influence. Another one was The Widow Basquiat. I don't know if people have read that. It's an incredible book. Basically, Basquiat's moves Suzanne, and it's a biography by Jennifer Clement, but it's like so close third that it actually feels like a
Interesting.
memoir.
Yeah.
It was really amazing what she pulled off in that book. And then I also, this is a kind of pivot, but Say Nothing by Patrick Radden Keefe was
Yeah.
something that I actually looked at the structure of that book,
Yeah.
and I wrote out. I tried to figure out how he pulled it off. And even though it's a totally different book than my own, it was
Yeah.
really influential on me for The Acid Queen. Yeah.
I always go to one book that I read like early in my journalism career. I was obsessed with a magazine writer named Gary Smith. He's a Sports Illustrated writer who probably their best, I think arguably the best magazine writer ever in this country. And he wrote a famous story called, I don't even know how famous it's famous to be, but called Damned Yankee. This is just one of his many stories, but it was about this man, John Malangone, who was anointed to be like the next big Yankee. This is in the 1950s, and he was falling apart though because when he was a child, he accidentally murdered his cousin, and his life sort of unraveled. And the way, I'm not describing it very well, but the way he tells the story and the way he does all of his stories, there's so much character development, plot, suspense, just human pathos in his stories that people can't accomplish in an entire book. And I just think he's a masterful storyteller and gets to the heart of who a person is in like even just a phrase. Sometimes even just like a sentence or a phrase, you can absolutely understand this person. And I just think that's an incredible, very rare gift. So if anybody, his collected works are just called Beyond the Game, but he's written about, in addition to Damn Yankee, he's written about baseball on American, Native American reservations. He's written about the volleyball team and Lady Vols down in Tennessee. I think that's right, Lady Vols are Tennessee.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's not just sports stories. I think he's sort of like a gifted human purveyor, I guess, for lack of a better word. Yeah.
So before we turn it over to questions, I'd like to thank Abbott and Susannah for coming today. And now, if there are any questions, you.
So true crime is pretty popular, especially in the podcast format. What's your best advice on telling a true crime story, just generally?
Generally
People
speaking,
get very provocative, so.
yeah. I like the current trend that people are taking where they're starting to center the narrative on the victims. I think that's something that's way overdue and actually makes for a more powerful narrative. You know, I was just reading something about like, you know, look at Ted Bundy. Nobody knows the name of his victims, and they should be just as humanized. Well, I mean, I guess people have been humanizing Ted Bundy lately, but they should be just as well-rounded and sort of developed and fully fleshed out as human beings as he has been lauded for being a crazy murderer. So I just think that that's a good sort of trend that we're seeing, I think.
I don't write true crime.
Yeah. Some kind of criminal things happen.
Yeah, I've written about crime. I mean, I guess how to tell a true crime. I mean, it's how you tell a story. It's no
Yeah.
different from any other story. Pacing, character development, it's all important.
Yeah.
Just to your point, not only just the perpetrator, but the victim. I think that's a great point. But I think the thing that makes true crime the pulpy thing that it is usually pacing.
Yeah.
Very important part of that.
Yeah, and the way you do reveals.
Yeah.
I mean, the nice thing about true crime is you can really write it like fiction, because it sort of has all. I think you can write any nonfiction like fiction. You can use the
It's
same
telling-
techniques.
it's storytelling.
It's storytelling.
Yeah.
It's cliffhangers. It's suspense. It's building tension.
It's genre storytelling, but it still is, you know, follows the same. There are some great books that I'm now forgetting that.
Yeah.
Like Raymond Chandler, look at him. Look
Yeah.
at what he says, because
Yeah.
just follow his like 10 rules of writing and
Yeah.
apply that to true crime.
Patricia Highsmith also, I mean, she wasn't writing true crime, but her fiction writing advice I thought was really frank and funny and insightful too. Patricia Highsmith has like a writing book.
Prior to opening up the Q&A, you both gave book recommendations, and I was listening, but I didn't write them down, and I've already forgotten. Could you give them again?
Sure. So Minor Characters by Joyce Johnson, Say Nothing by Patrick Radden Keefe, and Widow Basquiat by Jennifer Clements. And if you're interested in writing in general, my favorite writing book of all time, writing guide, is this. It's a green book, and I think it's called The Modern Library's Writer's Workshop by a man named Stephen Koch. He was the head of fiction writing at Columbia. And it's like, you know, the book's in thirds, but it basically talks about the techniques of famous writers. And a big part of it's called shitty first drafts, which I really love. But it makes you feel less alone when you're writing, and I highly recommend that book as well.
Yeah. He probably said that before Anne Lamott, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Bird by Bird.
Yeah,
I'm sure
Bird by
everybody's
Bird's
heard that.
fantastic as well.
But mine was Beyond the Game by Gary Smith. But even if you don't buy his book, just Google Damn Yankee by Gary Smith, and you'll see what I mean in terms of his incredible characterization in just a few. Yeah.
Yes, Beverly.
I appreciate your adherence to all of the grammar rules. I taught English for 40 years in a community college, and I had plenty of students who were not that good about documenting their sources. But thinking about that, you know, creative nonfiction, I've read so many books that are based on, but they're not regular nonfiction. Do you ever think when you're doing all of that research and you've got this wonderful story, just turning it into creative
She
nonfiction?
has.
Well, the thing is, like, to write a nonfiction book, it's incredibly hard because not only do you want to find something that has the same, you can write it like fiction, it has character development, there's stakes, there's a climax, there's an actual narrative there, but you have to have the source material in order to back that up. And if you don't have that, like I said, you need dialogue. If you don't have memoirs, newspaper articles, contemporary interviews, all of that stuff, then I just don't do it as a book, you know? And there have been instances where you know, I say this is a fantastic story, but it's not a nonfiction story. So,
But she has actually decided to do things as fiction, which is, you know.
yeah, I do.
she's
I
done
have
both.
a novel that was based on a true story.
So there's an avenue there for someone who's done both. I've only done nonfiction, but
But
that
you
is
should try fiction.
it's exciting to be able to if a story just doesn't have the elements that you
Yeah.
need. It would be kind of nice to
But you
pivot
just
and
make
just
it up.
make them up. That would be
Yeah.
nice, but it's also terrifying.
Yeah,
So.
but it's my pet peeve when like people when people write, you know, call that kind of fiction nonfiction. I mean,
Yes.
if you're making anything up, it's not.
It's fiction.
It's
Yes.
fiction.
Well, and then people believe it.
Yeah.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
read it in a book, but it isn't true.
Well, that's amazing because I'm a big advocate and promoter of fact checkers. I hire fact checkers for all of my books, and it's expensive and you have to pay out of pocket, but it's very important to me. But what's frightening is that majority of books are not fact-checked.
Yeah.
So you have to keep that in mind. You're like fact-checking against books that aren't fact-checked. It's kind of
Yeah.
wild.
And she's found like many errors in
Oh,
like
yeah, in
stuff
so
that was
many books.
considered
I mean,
canon.
yeah, when you really start to dig in, you find errors.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have time for a couple more. Did you have a question behind?
Yeah, you're spending 12 hours in the stacks. When you get home, how do you sleep at night? How do you turn your brain off?
Oh, I don't.
But is that a problem? Because I can't imagine, you know, I can't ever turn my brain off, so.
No, I'm with you. I'm a horrible insomniac. I always have been. So basically, I just take sleeping pills and a cocktail. Just to be honest with you.
That's perfect. Amen.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Adam?
But you have children. She has you have
I'm just
little
so
children.
tired.
Yeah.
All the time. 3 kids under 6.
Borrow a shot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, here,
Yeah,
you
I
can
should
take
borrow a
mine.
child. Oh my
Take
God,
my
that would help.
take my kids,
That
please.
should actually be a thing.
Yeah,
Borrow
yeah.
borrow a child.
I was struck by what you said, Susannah, where you said you start writing sometimes when the research isn't complete.
Yes.
Although it sounds like Abbott, like there's a way in which you go full immersive mode, and then you're like, bell goes off, and you're like, I'm ready to write.
Oh no, you have to write. I write when I research
So I
too.
just wanted,
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about, I want to hear you guys talk about like, if there is a certain rule you have with regard to research and the time you allot before you're ready even to begin writing, assuming that you're going to have more research to do.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what's the dialectic between like starting to write and have to go deeper?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well, I was to say it's arbitrary because
Yeah.
I just set a time. I have a year to research. And then when that year is up, I have to start writing no matter what. And I typically, last time, and I'm going to do it again, I actually set aside, 5 days to be at a writer's retreat so that I had to, and I did it before the year. So the year was in January, and I made that in November. And even though I probably threw out a majority of what I wrote there, the blank page is really what is that yawing blank page of like, oh, I'm never going to be able to do this. Once you get that done with, it kind of allows you to just start being a little bit freer and starting to write, not getting so overwhelmed by the amount of research. Because really, you only know what you really need to research when you begin writing.
Yeah.
Because then you'll say, oh, well, what was the color of his eyes? Or what was the weather like that day? Or far bigger things. And so you only really know that when you write. So the research really, you kind of get a foundation so that you can write. You can begin to write a bit with a lot of TKs, like a lot of I don't know. And then you have to fill in those, and then you know where to be targeted about the research. So it's like a fact-finding year.
You're like a year.
A year of fact-finding. And then I have to start, no matter what.
Yeah. If inspiration strikes, I just will write anytime it does. And the nice thing about nonfiction, which is why I think fiction is so much harder, nonfiction, the story is already written for you. You can't, the narrative is there. You don't have any twists that are going to come. There might be details that arise that change a scene, or a character comes in, or that, a conversation sort of take things in a different turn. But the basic structure of the book is what it is. And so, my novelist friends talk about treat scenes. I'm sure maybe you have this, where there's a scene that you're going to have to write, and it's like you can't wait to write it. So if I know there's a scene like that, and I'm feeling sort of stuck otherwise, I'll just I'm going to write a treat scene. And of course later I'll go back and beef it up and add detail and stuff like that. But if I feel inspired to write, I do it, because research it's just so. Like I said, you could just keep doing that and forget that, oh, you're supposed to be writing. So I just write whenever it strikes me, because sometimes that's a rare.
We should give a little shout out. Adam has a book, Play World, that is, what's it, 12 o'clock?
It's at noon, right?
Yeah.
Noon. And he's going to be on a panel. Who's on your panel today? I'm sorry. I don't mean to put you on the spot. It's a great panel. And so go to his as well.
Go to his panel.
Yeah.
So thank you, guys. We're going to let all of you go so you can get to your next event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Valerie. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.